Hey everybody, Joe Ducey here with ABC15 and Let Joe Know, and with the Rebound Arizona, and we are here for a town hall involving two topics that are related to COVID and haven't gone away. I was just talking to these guys about, I think a month and a half ago we did our first town hall and it was about unemployment. Well, here we are again. Unemployment is still a huge issue. Unemployment insurance, people not being able to get their pay, people getting pay they shouldn't get. We're also talking about evictions because in about 2 weeks, the stay order, the delay of enforcement for evictions is going to be ending. And there's concern that there could be, in some minds, chaos as people are being moved out of their places, hundreds, possibly thousands around Arizona. So we're working with the State Bar of Arizona, and we've got a couple of attorneys here who work with these kinds of things a lot and can offer some advice and kind of, talk a little bit about what they've been seeing. Also, our producer, Monica Williams, is here. Monica and I have done a number of stories on unemployment and employment, about going back to work. You have concerns about going back to your workplace. I mean, I haven't been back to ABC15, and Monica, how long has it been?
Yeah, probably close to 3.5, 4 months almost.
3.5, 4 months, and I'm sure they're going to protect us. But, if people worry about those kinds of things, if you go back into the workplace, and what does that mean for your job if you decide you don't want to do it? So the two attorneys with us, John Hulk. John, if you'd raise your hand there. He's with McQueen and Gottlieb, and he can talk to us about the other part of this, evictions, and what you might be able to do if you're a renter, and how to work with a landlord possibly. And, there are landlords who also have concerns, I think, because they haven't received money for a period of time, and not all of them are major complexes that can sustain this. Some mom and pops just try to, break even. And also Joshua Black, the law offices of Joshua Black, he's with us. And Joshua will handle some of the unemployment and employment concerns that you guys might have. So post your questions there. We're going to be here for a little while, and let us know what you're thinking, and we're going to go over some of these with you when you can. Also, I told you the State Bar of Arizona is partnering with us on this, and they've got something called a Find a Lawyer. The State Bar of Arizona, Find a Lawyer. It's their Arizona Response Legal Hotline. And Corlin, I don't know if you have that. There it is right there. You're ahead of me. The legal hotline number is 866-611-6022. Don't dial it now. If you can, take this time, because their time's worth a lot of money, and they're doing this for free for you. So I hope you take advantage of this right now. But in the future, this is a legal hotline. If you've got COVID-19 concerns, you can talk to people here. They have operators who can help you with certain things. You can get a half an hour consultation with an attorney through their legal hotline there. So that's great. And we appreciate the State Bar of Arizona working with us on this. So where do we want to begin? Let's talk, I guess, about unemployment and employment. And let me ask Joshua, what you're seeing in this area. I mean, are you seeing the same things we're seeing, which is people still dealing with a system that doesn't seem to be working? They can't get their money, people who need it, and people, who don't need it are. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And that's a great question. We've been going through this process with navigating the pandemic unemployment now for several months. And while there have been improvements with the process, we are still hearing a lot of folks having trouble, whether it's on the online application process or getting turned down when they should qualify. There's a lot of hiccups in that process still. And so we're still getting a lot of questions about that and about how to navigate through that process if you're finding yourself unemployed for the first time.
What would you advise people to do? There are probably a lot of things, but if there's a piece of advice to give people who are waiting, still trying to get that unemployment pay, or answers to their questions about why it's been flagged, what would you tell them to do other than patience? Or maybe that's what you're going to say, patience.
Well, patience is good. We'll start there. But beyond that, there are some affirmative steps that folks can be taking. First off, they should be logging on to the DES website each week at azui.com and making sure that they're updating their claim. So even if their claim is still in process or it's shown that they have been turned down previously, they want to make sure that they're updating that. For the first, I would say, 2 months of this process, almost all claims were getting turned down just automatically, and you had to keep going in and updating until the federal funds were actually dispersed to Arizona, and then were ready to be dispersed. So that's my biggest piece of advice is you want to just make sure you're still updating the system that's telling you you don't currently qualify, because those qualifiers are changing, and certainly you want to make sure that you're in the system so that the state can get you the help that you deserve if it's available.
Okay. I was going to quickly go to John to talk a little bit about eviction. Then we'll go back and forth between you guys. But I wanted to let people know that we're also talking about the eviction process and the enforcement that may be going away. John, what are you hearing about this? Are there people who are, I guess, you're hearing about concerns from renters, and any advice you would give renters about what they should be doing now if they weren't able to pay their full rent and they are here because of that in that order, that governor's order?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Joe. There's been a lot of new issues that have come up due to COVID. So these are unique circumstances. To anyone who's having any issues paying their rents, the best thing that I would advise first and foremost is to start with a conversation with your landlord or your property manager. Having a conversation with them is a great first step, letting them know what your current circumstances are, any ability that you have to pay, and seeing if they're willing to work with you on some sort of payment agreements or payment plan. The landlord has the option to enter into any agreements. They can waive fees, they can take reduced payments or enter into other agreements. So for anyone that's facing a hardship there, I would encourage you to speak with your landlord or management company.
Okay.
They also have a couple resources I was going to point out as well. Yeah. If you go to saveourhomeaz.gov, it's a program that's through the housing department with the Arizona Housing Department. If you go there, they have applications for rental assistance. There's millions of dollars available for renters across Arizona, and I would encourage people to go apply for applications there.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of money that has been set aside for renters. I think it was it 50 million? Well, 50 million in Arizona for, I don't know if it was just for renters, but I know at least 5 of that was. But there are millions of dollars here, and also through the CARES Act. Yet there are concerns that the governor's office isn't acting fast enough, that they're back. I think last I checked, they were still in April answering some of those. Have you heard of those kinds of concerns, people not getting the aid that they should be getting?
Yeah, there's a lot of pending applications, and from everything that I've seen, there's been a bit of a slow response to this. So to the extent that people can, I would still encourage people to apply. You can't have any assistance if you don't apply. So for any administrative issues that they have going on the back ends, I would still encourage people to at least reach out and apply for the assistance, because it shows a good faith effort on your part. And it's also something I would mention to landlords or property managers, just to show that you're taking efforts to try and get this resolved.
Okay. Monica, anything you're seeing that looks like something we could address?
Yeah, Dexter Sampson had a good question, and I think it pertains a little bit to this, that can landlords raise rent during this time? I know we're worried about paying rent already, but is there an option for them to raise rent, and what could people do in that situation?
Sure. So it's going to be a bit fact specific, just as any question would be. If you are on either a month-to-month tenancy, a landlord could potentially raise the rents. If you're coming up on a lease renewal, the landlord could raise the rent there as well. How much they raise it or the circumstances in which we're facing, I think there's a poor time for them to raise the rents. But as far as whether they can or not, it is possible the landlord could raise the rents.
Okay. Anybody else? One of the other concerns, about the evictions. Let's see. We had some. I wonder we'll go through some of the questions that came in a little bit earlier here. I'm sorry, I'm at my computer looking at a different file. Let's see. A lot of these people. Well, let's talk a little bit about this, John. Let me ask you about the evictions, because the evictions were actually allowed to continue. So it's just the enforcement that was delayed. So what kind of concerns are there that now these evictions are going to go through if this happens in a couple of weeks or whenever it happens? And will these people even be able to get possibly subsidized housing? I don't think they can if they have an eviction on their record. And will landlords be willing to rent to people with evictions?
Yeah, it's creating a big issue. There's a lot of questions, and these are unique times. We really don't have a precedent to go off of for past examples. People who have had issues paying rent, or landlords that have had issues collecting rents and unable to pay their mortgages. All these issues have been festering since February. Anyone that's had an issue since then is stacking up, and that here at the end of July we're going to see some issues that are all coming to a head. To your point, it is true that evictions have continued. The executive order that Governor Ducey signed was only a postponement of eviction actions. It set forth specific requirements people had to qualify under. But if you don't meet any of the qualifications, contracting COVID, having a reduced income due to COVID, children that are home because of school closures, and a few other exceptions. But if you're not qualifying, it is possible that landlords were proceeding with those eviction actions.
And I think that I was told that applying through the Department of Housing now, if you've already applied through the Department of Housing, the advice was go ahead and keep getting with them, trying to find out where your money might be. But if you haven't done that yet, they're so backlogged that maybe your best bet is to go in with some of the municipalities, that cities and counties have some money that might be available as well. And so your best bet is to try to contact them to see if there's something that can help you, because this is going to be if it happens July 23rd, you're going to have 4 months possibly in rent. Maybe, I think some people are probably trying to pay partial rent, maybe many, but some aren't paying anything. And that's going to be a lot of money due at one time.
Yeah, it is. We're about 3 weeks out from this because, like you said, July 23rd is coming up. One other option that I've advised some people to do is, if you do have any amount of money that you're able to pay, if you're able to work something out and get something in writing and signed from either the property manager or from the landlord, if you're willing to offer some amount of money and voluntarily leave, then that could be something that's helpful, because then you would agree that they're not going to enter a judgment against you. You don't have an eviction judgment. You're paying some money to the landlord, and that can potentially be a useful settlement option. So that way, going forward, when you do try and get into a new lease agreement, you're not going to have that on your history. So that can be another possible alternative to getting this resolved.
Okay, great. Anything else, Monica, that you're seeing there, or I'll keep going?
Well, I think that tied into one of the emails that we had gotten, that she had been able to pay partial rent kind of through this time period, and has kind of been able to have a dialogue with their landlord, but is questioning, does she have to pay future rent potentially can the landlord ask for that to kind of stay where she is in the time being?
So it is possible for a landlord to accept partial payments under the Arizona law. If you have a partial payment agreement, in order for it to be memorialized and the specific terms set forth, there needs to be something in writing and signed. If there's just sort of a phone call conversation and oral agreements, that's a little bit more subjective. What the payments are due is more ambiguous. So anyone that is going to agree with their landlord or manager to make partial payments, I would encourage them to have something in writing. And if they're agreeing that, if your rent's $1,000 a month, but for the next X amount of months, I can pay you $500, put something like that in writing, just because if they do try to come after you for past due rents, you'll have something to point to, and that would definitely help your case.
That's great. All right, hey, Joshua, let me ask you about, this is something that came up, and I'm not going to ask you about it because I know that, but Monica and I could talk about it. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it started trickling in, I guess, at first, and then we got just an avalanche after we did a story about people getting debit cards for unemployment, and they were getting as much as, I think in one case it looked like $28,000, but most of it, I think the average was $6,900. And we got 160 people who wrote us, which means there are so many other people out there, which we, if it was $6,900, I think it was $1.1 million that somebody was sending to these people, and they considered it to be fraud. You hadn't heard of that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Heard of that, Joe, and it's one of a number of issues that DES has dealt with over the last couple months. We've seen an agency that went from handling a few thousand claims a week to handling a few 100,000 claims a week over the last couple months. And that's resulted in a lot of problems, whether it's internal problems with just getting folks connected with the money they need. A lot of folks, saw a delay in payment for 2 months. So by the time they finally got their debit card, they were no help. And then now they have several thousand on a debit card. So even folks who were paid correctly, were ending up in these kind of difficult situations where the money hasn't quite been there when they need it. If my best advice would be, if you find that there's an error with your employment process, know that you're not alone, that's probably going to happen, and either figure out a way to get in touch with DES to get it corrected, or if you can't, unemployment attorney or somebody like myself could help you as well to make sure that that gets squared away.
Okay. If you're just joining us, thank you for being here on the ABC15 Facebook page and on YouTube. This is at ABC15 Town Hall. We do these every week. This week, we're concentrating on two of the biggest topics related to COVID-19 still. Two topics I think we thought might not be big topics, 3 months later, unemployment and evictions. And we've got two attorneys with us. Up at the top, you see Joshua Black. He's with the law offices of Joshua Black. And then we have John Hulk with McQueen and Gottlieb. And John handles the questions about, or, he handles concerns related to evictions and landlord-tenant issues. And Joshua handles unemployment and employment. So we're talking a little bit about those. If you've got questions, post them here. We're working with the State Bar of Arizona, and they have got their own legal hotline. It's called the Arizona Responds Legal Hotline, and the number's right there, 866-611-1622. And I said before, don't call them now. Use this time if you can, because we have these two attorneys who are volunteering their time to help you. Post your questions, and we'll try to get to them, or stories that you have. But call them if you can at another time, because they will offer you help. And if they can't get through, if they aren't able to offer it immediately, they'll set up time with an attorney for, I think it's a half an hour for free. And you can also go to azbar.org for that information. And we were just talking about something kind of strange that's been happening. These people who are not getting unemployment money. And then now I think, Monica, it's up to 200, I think, people close.
Yeah, I would say that we've hit 200, especially after our last story of people who have just gotten these cards out of nowhere with potentially thousands of dollars on them each. So it's grown pretty largely. Yeah,
and those are just people who are responding to us. The Attorney General came out, I guess, after saying something about it and what you should do. But what are they saying, Monica? They're basically saying that it's not that they have two different systems here.
Yeah, so they're saying this fraud really has impacted the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance side of things when it comes to unemployment. And that's where federal money and state money is used to pay out that additional money in unemployment. And they're saying that scammers have gotten a hold of personal information, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, even your work history, and they're using that to file these false claims. And what they're doing is they're using your name and your address, but entering in a different bank account number. And that was flagged by unemployment, and it triggered a debit card to be sent out. They have told us that protocol has recently changed, but there's still a lot of concern because different things don't match up, even birthdays or driver's license numbers and things like that in that system. So we're still sorting through exactly what's going on, but they say that it is a fraud situation, that people have filed fraudulently with your information, but you're getting the debit card because the bank account information was flagged. Which is weird to me. And we're working on more stories on this, but it's weird to me that there's a system where a debit card automatically goes out to these people if something else is flagged. I mean, I don't understand that, and I don't know how they can access that money and why that happened. DES isn't providing a lot of answers, so we're trying to piece together what's happening. So if you're out there and you've had this happen to you, we'd like to know. And you can go to abc15.com/letjoeknow or Rebound, and you can tell us right there, or you can email us at rebound@abc15.com. Let us know if you've got this, what you've seen. I mean, we've had people who've they've used maiden names from 1999 they haven't used, or we've had people who have since passed away have gotten these cards. Family members have gotten them in their loved ones' names, and they're not even here, anymore. So it's wide ranging who's getting them, and I mean, people who don't even live in Arizona have gotten debit cards with funds on them, which is the other big concern with that. But we also do have a list. If you are one of the people who got the debit card, we do have a list on our website, abc15.com/townhall. And that has a list of about 5 different steps that the Attorney General's office says you should take to file a fraud claim with various offices, and potentially even get identity theft protection and stuff like that. So that's all on our website, abc15.com/townhall.
Okay, great. Hey, John, let me ask you about what people do. You said what people should do now is really try to work with their landlords if they're renters and they're they've gone through the eviction process already, so it's inevitable at some point. What happens if there is a constable knocking on their door? Do they have any rights at that point, or are those gone? Or does it depend on the case?
Well, so anyone that does have the constable knock, if it's after if it's after July 23rd, that's going to be when the protections expire. I know there's a conversation going on right now in the legislature to try and extend that, and it's going to be up to the legislature and the governor to do so. But for now, if anyone comes and knocking at the door before July 23rd, I would encourage them to have any documents that show a reduced amount of income or show anything that's applying under the governor's executive order for the COVID exceptions.
Okay, all right. So there isn't a whole lot that I guess at that point that the constable's there. It's probably been there before at one point, and then maybe proof was shown to him or her, and then they went away, and now they're coming back. I mean, at the apartment, do you? I don't know if you also represent apartments or complexes, the business side of this. Are they hurting in some ways? Some of these places or wanting to get back and get some of this rent money?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's on both sides. It's clear what all the issues that all the renters are having across Arizona. But like you alluded to earlier on, there's also a number of individual landlords who have one or two rental properties. We have mortgage obligations, and some of the people who own these properties as rentals haven't had any rental income since February or January this year. So they're facing foreclosure notices, and they're having a lot of issues, and there really isn't a whole lot of relief for individual landlords. So it's really not a good situation for anyone. But even with apartment complexes, they're not able to generate income. They're not able to provide services that are there. So it's something that's, there's a full range of issues going on here. So one other point I was going to address also, just with the evictions, if there is an individual and if you have a conversation with your individual landlord, this is probably going to apply more to individuals than it would be to management companies. But the CARE Act also has prohibitions and moratoriums against eviction actions through the end of August. That goes until August 31st. So if anyone is facing eviction, one of the things that you can do when you're having that conversation with your landlord is to ask if they have a federally secured mortgage. These are going to be mortgages that are backed by either Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac.
Right.
And if they have those, and that's the lender that an individual landlord has, they're going to be prevented from moving forward with an eviction action until August 31st. So it's difficult to really obtain that information. It's not something that's publicly available, but I would encourage people to be aware of that and at least address it with their landlord, because that could be another way to postpone an eviction if they're working through some issues.
So they could get it, unless this order is extended for the enforcement delay, they could get at least another month, I guess, out of it while they try to get things together.
As long as the individual landlord has a mortgage that's backed federally. Right. If it's a private loan, if they have it through any of the number of different companies out there, it's going to be the July 23rd deadline, but that could be another alternative. So like I said, from the beginning, communication is key. Have an open conversation and see what we can do to try and get things resolved for these people.
At this point, it looks like the governor's office is not biting on extending that. In the last news conference, I think the governor said, no relative of mine, Governor Ducey, said that he, was going to, I guess, wait and see what comes up and then decide what they're going to do for the future. And in any email correspondence with their office, they have not, we've asked them directly about that. They haven't addressed that, so they're doing other things. But I think the mindset for people who want to have it expanded, 6 months, I think right now, 33 Democratic lawmakers asked the governor to extend it into January, so 6 months. And I think the mindset was, hopefully by that time, we won't have the surge again of COVID. So you're releasing people right now into this environment where all this is happening. They may have no place to go. Plus, hopefully, you would guess in 6 months, maybe people are going back to work. They'd have jobs. Some of these people do not have them now. They might be able to have the money to afford to pay a landlord. So I think that was part of that mindset about why that, they may want that expanded. I was going to ask, before we leave John there for a minute, about Save Our Homes. Do you know anything about Save Our Homes? One person raised a question here, and I'm not that familiar.
I know a little bit about it. What's the question?
Basically asking how long does it take for a rental, for an application there, or for whatever they want to get. I think it came from Carrie Marie. Corlin, I don't know
Okay.
if you can get that up there, but well, here it is. How long is it taking for Save Our Homes to respond for rental assistance? I know applicants who have waited over a month so far. We talked about the backlog before, so if you could, I don't know if you know anything about them.
Specific to the timeline, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that there is a giant influx in requests. Arizona, the Save Our Home program through the Arizona Department of Housing has been in place for as long as I am aware of. So it's been a program that's been available to try and help people who are, facing eviction issues, facing foreclosure issues, and it's been a really helpful resource. But again, there's been a giant strain on all of the public services because generally when you have maybe a few hundred or a few thousand requests, they're now being inundated with the huge influx of cases that COVID is driving. So I don't have. I wish I had a better answer on the timeline.
Yeah.
But I would say that if you haven't applied, apply,
Wow.
and then we're hoping that we get some distributions of that state funding.
Before we leave you, because I wanted to ask Josh a couple of questions too. Kelly Pedraza, I don't know, Kelly, if I'm pronouncing your name right, and I don't know if you have that one, Corlin. It was at 1211. She says, this is the other side. As a property manager of single owner homes, it's great that people are getting assistance for rent, but many haven't been paying. There's been no relief. And that's if they have COVID related concerns and can prove that, that's their right at this point, not to have the enforcement. There's been no relief for homeowners who still have to pay their mortgages. This will lead to high foreclosures again if the government doesn't get quick homeowner relief programs. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting too. And I don't know if you could address that, but I thought that was another concern here that kind of was the other side that we've been talking about a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it certainly is. I know that from a property management perspective, or even from an individual landlord perspective, if you own a home or a couple different rental properties, there's not as many programs to help these people out, and they're being affected just as much as the individual tenants as well. So I know that a lot of individual private mortgage companies are offering different forbearance programs. They're willing to put several months at the end of a mortgage term. So again, I think communication really is the key. The circumstances here are so unique, and I think that if people are willing to have the conversation, picking up the phone and actually starting that conversation can be the hardest part. But if you're willing to have that conversation with your lender at the mortgage company, with your property manager at your apartment complex, with your landlord, that's gonna be the first step to getting any resolution. And I think that, in my experience, at least working with individual lenders and with property managers, people are usually willing to try and find some common grounds.
Okay, let me talk to Joshua quickly about a couple of things that have come in about employment. A lot of people, we talked before this, that well, even though they've closed things down again for a while, and people are still going back to work in some industries, concerned about what it's going to be like when they get there. And we went over a little bit of this earlier. There are new people here now. What are the concerns that people should have? They're scared to go back because they're not sure they're going to be protected. Is their job going to be there if they say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable going back because maybe it's a teacher in a classroom. Am I going to have my job if I don't go back?
That's a great question, Joe, and that's one that's going to really vary case by case. In Arizona, we have something we call at-will employment, and that's a general idea that says, for the most part, our job's a take it or leave it. So if you decide that your employer, is not the company you want to work for, you can quit. If they decide they don't want you, they can let you go. But there is some differences when it comes to things like COVID. If your employer's not taking the adequate steps to keep you safe and secure, and that's why you're not wanting to go back, that is something that the law could address. That would be outside of that general at-will employment, and you would have rights to safety in the workplace. So if you're not being provided PPE, if your employer is not implementing steps to keep you or other employees or clients safe, then there's absolutely something you can do. You can speak up about your company, or you can also make a complaint to part of the state government called ADOSH, which is the Arizona Division of Occupational Safety and Health. And if you make a complaint to them, they can come in and investigate the workplace and ensure that they are adhering to those guidelines.
Okay. It was one of the questions came from Jennifer, and she said basically this: I've come into a second round of COVID symptoms, and I've been informed that if I have to go back into work, although let's see. and I've been informed that if I have to go back to work, although I want to work from home. So she has to basically go back to work, but wants to work from home. My job is saying that after 14 days that I must go to work since I cannot get a doctor's office, since I don't have a physician. I want to keep my fellow coworkers safe, but I cannot if I'm being told I cannot work from home. I'm just in, expected resolution here. I just want to work from home and not feel the need to be terrified about having others sick from my sickness. I mean, I think if this person has COVID, they wouldn't have to go back to work, and I would think the workplace would probably want them at home and being treated, correct?
Right, and I think Jennifer has a couple different questions all wrapped up in one, and it's expressing the sentiments a lot of people have right now in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
We see the numbers going up with COVID. We see that the infections are increasing, and at the same time, most of us are being told, all right, your time's up. It's time to start coming back into the office. We need to start running the company again. And so if you have a legitimate concern, Jennifer, or anyone else in that situation, that your company is being negligent or they're failing to do something to keep you safe, then that's something you want to talk to an attorney about. That's something that you want to address because you don't want to go back if you're afraid you're going to infect others or that you're going to get infected. But it has to be something beyond just the general fear that we all have that it's a rough time out there right now.
Right.
We understand it's a rough time, but that's part of the employment relationship. We all have to kind of make it through this somehow. And for the most part, the laws are only going to require employers to do the best that they reasonably can. So if they don't have work from home available for some reason because of the type of job, that may not be an option to you. But it's certainly something that you should be able to talk to HR about and get some sort of accommodation.
Another email came in talking about the same kind of thing. Can you find out from unemployment in regards to quitting work due to poor work cleaning in close distance and being able to get unemployment? I guess is what they're trying to say. They don't want to go back because, and you were saying before that if you can prove that the precautions weren't taken at the workplace, if masks aren't provided, if there isn't social distancing, if you're, elbow to elbow with people, then you might be able to but you would have to prove this. And I don't know if that would be in a court of law, if you're talking about attorney there, or if there's something they could do before they would have to hire an attorney. You said maybe go to the department and with the state?
Sure, absolutely. There's a number of things that folks can do before they have to hire an attorney.
Okay.
The first thing would be to make what we call a whistleblowing complaint to ADOSH. So ADOSH is Arizona's version of OSHA. That's the agency that's tasked with workplace safety. So if you feel that your employer, whether it's COVID related or not, is not keeping you safe, you can speak up to them. You have 30 days from the time that you see the unsafe condition. And that's going to start a process where it's going to protect you, for one, because you now have protection under the law as what we call a whistleblower, meaning you can't be retaliated against because you're speaking up about this. And then two, it's going to start that process where the employer will get investigated. And if they're not doing the right thing, the state's going to force them to come into compliance.
Okay. Well, that's a lot to think about. Monica, you had a question that you saw?
I didn't, sorry.
I think Dexter Sampson, did you already go over that?
Yes, that was earlier.
That was one earlier. Okay. Yeah. I think that that's going to be, we're going to be seeing more and more of the, even though unemployment concerns are still going to be big and not getting the money, because that is something that's going on right now. And I think it's going to go on for a while. It doesn't seem the system's getting any better. Although I have to say the DES says the sending out debit cards has stopped because their protocol has stopped. So in other words, they're not just blindly sending out debit cards to people whose accounts are flagged, which made no sense to me anyway. I don't know how that was done because we can't get their answers. But that has stopped. But I think more of the questions are going to be about going back to work and being concerned about it. And if they can get unemployment to tide them over if they are fired. And I guess they could.
Absolutely, Joe. Right now, folks get unemployment if you've lost your job due to COVID. Right. So even if you don't traditionally qualify for unemployment in Arizona, through the end of this month, you still have that pandemic unemployment assistance available, and you can still get up to $600 a week in unemployment from that pandemic unemployment assistance if you've lost your job due to COVID. theoretically, that could include if you've been forced out of your job because your employer just refuses to take precautions. Say, you would want to, of course, collect evidence of that and submit that to DES when you submit your application so that they can understand the full picture of why you're out of a job.
And I'm going to get to John in a second, but Joshua, while I have you here, we're getting some concerns here about people, and I've seen them before. Not just not getting unemployment, but seeing that they qualify, but for some reason something's been flagged with their profile or something, and they can't get answers because DES is so backed up with other things. Have you seen that as a common issue where they just can't get beyond that obstacle, whatever it is, to start this process up again?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of those issues.
What would you advise people to do? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No worries. The best advice I can give is just hang in there.
Okay.
Are getting taken care of eventually. Typically, before the pandemic, it took DES about 14 days from the time you filed your application to get everything processed and get you in and through the system. As of last month, they were telling us it was taking 21 plus days to do that. And that's if there's no hiccups. So there's going to be issues. Some of the problems you talked about earlier, if driver's licenses don't match up, if addresses don't match up, if you had an error when you typed in your social security or filled out your W-4 at a previous employer and maybe something isn't showing correctly, there's going to be little hiccups like that. Calling in doesn't seem to be very effective. DES has increased their call center, I want to say by about 150 folks, but it's still impossible to get through. So emailing seems to be the best, and then following up online at that azui.com.
Okay. John, we talked, how realistic is it, do you think, have you seen, and I don't know if you are in the weeds here, I guess, but have you seen landlords be accepting of tenants who want to work out deals with them? Because we talked about probably the best thing for tenants to do right now if they want to stay is to work out a deal where, hey, I could pay this amount, I'm going to pay this over this period of time or whatever, and then try to get assistance maybe through a state or government agency. But have landlords been willing to work with tenants, or can they just, find enough people that it doesn't matter?
No, the landlords are definitely showing a willingness to try and work with tenants. We're looking at it from a landlord's perspective. If you are someone who has not been able to pay rent for the last month or the last several months, the landlord's looking to get someone in who is able to pay rent.
Right.
Where we're at right now, we're still about 3 weeks away from any enforcements. So there's a lot of people who are still have about 3 weeks to a month of being in this, being in the rental. So if a tenant is willing to make some sort of payments, and if they're willing to leave the lease or willing to leave the rental premises early, that's a benefit to the landlord. So to the extent that you're willing to offer some payment, willing to leave voluntarily, not force a landlord to go through all of these different eviction actions, that's a benefit to a landlord. And if you can tell the landlord, hey, I can leave in a week, you can get someone else in here, I just ask that you not enter a judgment against me so I can get another place once I have my finances sorted out or have my job lined up, then that's certainly something that landlords are responding to.
Okay. Monica, you had something you wanted to say about the numbers.
Yeah, going back to Joshua's point, talking about the phone lines with unemployment, we hear you guys. At last conversation with DES per emails, they said they're still getting about 150,000 calls a day is what they're getting. And they only have so many staff. They have increased, yesterday they told me they increased their call center volume by 100 people, but they're using an outside vendor to hire those people. So they're still working on that. I know it's not a perfect solution, but that's what they gave us at our last update was they have increased staff, but they're still overwhelmed.
Yeah, it makes me think of that MVD story we did where another state agency that's inundated with calls. People can't get their car tags. I talked to a 15-year-old yesterday. We're going to do a story about she's just so dying to get her license, as we all remember us wanting to get in that car and drive. And it's been months and she can't get her driver's permit. So her parent can't help her drive, so but then we found out there were staffing issues at MVD and especially at the big call center at Perryville Prison, where they had to quarantine their whole call center, 39 people, because of a COVID outbreak. So there are staffing issues, there.
Yeah.
And I think the concern with DES is, it's easy for me to say, but let's hire more people. Let's hire some people who can answer the phone. You know, there's this big of a demand, right?
They've also said that with their fraud, the people who are responding to these fraud claims are kind of like a separate section, and they had about 80 staff members that were kind of looking into those claims that have to return everybody's, online forms or emails or phone calls, and they're looking to expand that. I don't know how soon that'll happen, but they said they had about 35 fraud claims on average a month. And then the pandemic hit, and that's jumped to about 5,000 in the last 3 or 4 months. So
it is a huge burden. It would be hard for any department, I know, but these just seem this just gone on too long.
Yeah, there's a lot of red flags still that need to be addressed, and
haven't been. I want to wrap it up here, but I wanted to go over a couple things before we do. Again, the State Bar of Arizona is our partner today with this town hall, and they have their hotline. It's called the Arizona Responds Legal Hotline, and the number is 866-611-6022. And yes, you can call them now because we're ending here. But it's basically finding a lawyer. It's COVID-19 related questions. So if you've got questions, like the questions you were asking here today, I appreciate all those. You can ask that. They'll try to answer those questions, and you can get up. I think it's a half an hour free consultation with an attorney if that need be for you. So that's there. You can also go to azbar.org and work through the process there as well. Any last thoughts? I guess Joshua Black with the Law Office of Joshua Black up there on top. Anything you'd say to people about? I guess probably the most serious thing is unemployment right now, and getting that money, and just being so frustrated. And I mean, I hate to say it's a waiting game, but you were saying basically to check back and to make sure that you're doing this weekly.
Right. Yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice for folks who are still in that process of trying to get their unemployment approved. Make sure you're logging on weekly, updating your profile. That's one of the requirements so that you are able to get the money when they finally get the bugs worked out. And then beyond that, as you're returning to work, be very careful about workplace safety and COVID. And if your employer is wanting you to do things that you feel are not safe or that don't comply with the CDC guidelines or the governor's mandates or the local mandates, that would be something to speak up about. It's your safety is number one priority. So it's something you want to speak up about and speak up early, not just for yourself, but for your other coworkers as too, since we're all in this together.
Great information. All right. And then John Halt with McQueen and Gottlieb, what would you say to renters now and tenants who are concerned about being evicted in the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think the main point is communication, having those conversations with your landlords, with your apartment managers. That's going to be the first step. They do have some funding that's available through the Arizona Department of Housing, which I would encourage. If there's any issues with utilities, I know that SRP and APS are also extending options to help people with those payments as well. The Arizona State Bar, as you mentioned, great resource. We have volunteer attorneys that give half-hour consultations. I'm one of them. I do those. And then in addition, there's Community Legal Services. That's another organization. I saw the city of Phoenix just approved funding for them, and they're actually going to be helping people navigate through some of these evictions that are coming forth. So I think between all of those will all be useful resources to anyone who's listening.
All right, great. You can also go to abc15.com/letjoeknow town hall. There's where we go. abc15.com/town hall. To get more information, you can go to /rebound to see some of the stories and let Joe know some of the stories that we've done here. Monica, what else did you want? The last to tell people to go if they have concerns.
Yeah, they can reach out to us. I mean, we are reading all of the emails that we get. There's a lot of them, so bear with us, and we will try to get as many answers as possible. But the email right there, rebound@abc15.com. We are reading them, responding, and hopefully we'll be able to get you guys some answers and help where it's needed.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys, for volunteering your time. Thanks, Monica, and thanks, everybody, for posting. And hopefully the next time we do this, it won't be about unemployment and evictions. Those won't be issues. All right? All right, take care, everybody. All right, I'll see you.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye.